Kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Peyton, Colorado. Hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Yes, we moved today, but more about that in a moment. How was your winning Wednesday? Did you get things set up for accountability for personal and mindset? Did you get things set up for, get some goals set for accountability in your business, for business goals? And what cultural theme are you having tonight for dinner? What culture are you exploring tonight with food and decorations and stuff? I've had a really good day today. We finally left, I think it was close to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. It was close to 2 o'clock, I think it was, when I finally left Mike and Brenda's in Colorado Springs, and we stopped by the dump place to dump the tanks, fill up the water tank, and then headed out here to Peyton, which is near Falcon, Colorado. It was only like from where I was, it was about a 40 minute drive. But of course I had to go dump the tanks, and then from when I dumped the tanks to when I got here was about 30 minutes. And I am in the middle of nowhere. It is awesome. I would show you out the window, but the sun is shining too brightly out to the west, but then there's views of the mountains out there. We've got rolling green hills. I have been told there are snakes around here, so I have to watch out for those. Although I got told I think they're called bullheads, which is good because then it means rattlers aren't around or something. I think that's what she said. But they have a fenced-in backyard, which is snake-proof. Like, yes. And and Zeffie had fun out in the yard. She met a cat, and the cat took one look at Zeffie and took off. So Zeffie gave chase, and the cat went running up the support pile, because we were downstairs outside from the basement, and in the living areas upstairs, and the cat went up one of the poles to where the veranda was that goes around the house up the top there, and got stuck. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt so bad about this poor cat being chased up there. And of course Zeffie's standing at the bottom, her feet up on the pole, like up on the post there, looking up, and it was a fairly good sized post, and it was done with stucco, and the cat managed to climb this thing. And so Christine went upstairs to try and rescue the cat. It finally figured out how to get through the railing safely onto the deck up top. It was hilarious. I felt sorry for the cat, but at the same time it was funny because I'd never seen Zeffie chase a cat before, and Zeffie did not get a chance to catch the cat. She wasn't in turbo mode though, but she did have a good run around the backyard. But it's magical up here, and I can't wait. Hopefully the clouds will clear up a little bit, because there's going to be some spectacular skies up here because I don't have city lights. So maybe we'll get to see some really good stars and stuff tonight too. So big thank you to Mike and Brenda for putting up with me for 3.5 weeks. You guys were the most amazing hosts ever. And it was really good to get to know them, because I've only met them at conferences before, or at meetings and on Zoom and stuff, and never really got the chance to sit down and just talk with them and get to know more about them. And it's been a magical 3.5 weeks, so thank you so much for your hospitality. It has been truly appreciated, and I just can't thank you guys enough for your for opening your home up for Zeffie and I. We just had such a blast with you guys. And now we're at Christine and Dave's place, and this, like I said, this place is magical. And Dave restores cars. Yes, he's got his own paint shop out the back. He's got a great workshop there. And Christine is a boudoir photographer, as well as what's the name of the era? She does photos for people dressed up in the 1940s. Does those pin-up posters. We should get some, and there's a name for them, rockabilly. So she does that rockabilly era photographs, and she is an incredible photographer. Whether it's the boudoir or whether it's the rockabilly, she has an incredible photographs. And around here, she's got there's some old cars sitting here. There's this great old shed out there that she can use as the backdrops for these photos from the 1940s. But she does an incredible, amazing job with her photographs. I got to see some of her workspace today, and just to see the results of her work and stuff, and see where it was all created, was just, it was kind of cool. So tonight I have to, I've got a couple of meetings to do after this, and but my question today our genealogy question today comes from Sam. And Sam would like to know, how do you go about finding your female ancestor's maiden name? Now, for those of you who don't know what a maiden name is, that is the name that females are born with. So it's the last name of their father or their mother, depending what the situation is. But the maiden name is the name that they had before they got married, for those that take their husband's names. And when you're looking at your ancestors, very rarely did they not take their husband's name. It was just the done thing. So how you find the maiden name is look for the birth certificates, and the birth certificates of their children, because on the birth certificates it has listed their mother's name, and it has to be her maiden name has to be listed there. So the father's name will be listed, his occupation, depending on what era the birth certificates are from. They may even have the father's occupation on the birth certificate. I have to tell you, these vital records are huge for information. So on a birth certificate, you will find not only the registered name of your ancestor, you'll find the date they were born, you'll find where they were born, you'll find out their father's name and occupation, you will find out their mother's name, and her maiden name is on there as well. And in some cases, I have seen birth certificates that have also asked how many other children they already have, so you know that this could be the third or the fourth child that was born to this. And on some of the, oh no, hang on, that's on the death certificates. So there's a lot of information that can be found on that. Then you get baptism records, and on the baptism records too, it also has the mother's, on some baptism records, it will have the date they were baptized, the baby was baptized or christened. Baptized or christened, it's very interchangeable with when you're talking about baptisms of babies. So babies are either baptized or christened, and on their documentation there, it will have the date the baptism / christening was done. Their birth date will be on there as well. So that's one way you can find your ancestor's birthday, if you find their christening records. And then it will have the parents' names on there, what the father's occupation is. It will have where they were living at the time. And then, of course, once you get the maiden name from those records, you can now go look up their marriage certificates. And if you also know around the time that they got married as well, you can go and see if you can find them. But you have to be a little careful, especially in the 1800s, especially in England, because there are common names. Well, for my family, for my personal family, my most common names during that time were William, John, Thomas, George, and James. And you might have been looking for John Smith. Seriously. It was that bad. And then common female names were Mary and Elizabeth and Sarah, and what were the other ones? Mary, Elizabeth, Sarah. I think those were the most, and Margaret. Yeah, and then of course, the people would shorten them, like Thomas could be written as THOS instead of, or Tom. They may have, and if, Robert was in there too. There was Roberts in there as well, but not as common as the other ones. James, they may have, they had ways of shortening things down. And instead of writing William, they may have written WM, just to be really confusing. But how you find your the ancestors' maiden names is on birth certificates, and sometimes on baptismal records, baptismal / christening records as well. And those ones, you can then have a lot of fun, and then you can use those to go back and find their marriage certificates. Sometimes you may find their maiden name by their marriage certificate. If you kind of have an idea around the year that they were born, and of course you already know the husband's name, so who did he get married to, around what year, but then you may end up with several couples that have the same first names for the husband and the wife, which can get a little confusing, and they have the same, and the husband has the same last name. So that's one thing you got to be very careful of when you're checking records. That's why you have to do a deep dive. You may find a record and go, "Oh, I found them." Have you really? There you go. You may not have, because it could be, like I said, one time I went through 183 John Eakins, born around in a 3-year time period in the 1850s, to find the one that fitted in my tree. There was still a whole bunch more. I can't tell you the total number of John Eakins that were born in those 3 years, but I can tell you I went through 183 of them to find the one. It took about 2 or 3, maybe, I think maybe 4 years. It took me multiple years to go consistently going through those records, just doing a couple of names here and there, because you've got to do a deep dive and go, okay, if I've got this one who married to this person, which happens to have the same first name as my 4th great grandmother, I think it was at that point. might have been fourth, yeah, about fourth great grandmother. You know, they haven't, and they had many couples with the same name, so it was trying to find that original birth date. That was the hard one. But you know, census records can help some as well, especially if they have family visiting. And I have found cases where I have found the female ancestors' family, because they may be in the house next door, or they may be visiting the daughter at the time, and it will have their, like, you know, and it will have relation, and it always has relationship to the head of the house. Well, the head of the house is usually the male, and it may have in their father-in-law, mother-in-law. Boom, you got the parents, and then you got sister-in-law, brother-in-law. I've had grandsons on there as well, so I've found people's grandsons. I've found granddaughters that way. A lot of great information can be found on census records too, especially if they've got the family listed and how they are related to the head of the house. So that's another way that you can find out maiden names too, is if they happen to be visiting during the census, then they will be listed in that household at the time. But also look who are their neighbors, who's in that same street as them as well, because sometimes you can find clues to families. And when you think you found the maiden name, then go back and look at the census records and see, was there somebody, you know, was there a family with that maiden, with the possible maiden name living somewhere around that area where they're now living, and you may find them within a street or two of where they're actually living. So looking at a census record, don't just look at the one entry, look at who is around them. You know, who's across the street, who's next door, who's the other side, who's in the same street as them, because you could find other families with the same name, which could be siblings, or if it's in the case of a male, it could be his parents. So there's all sorts of ways that you can find maiden names. So birth certificates, christening records, sometimes census, newspapers when they make birth announcements or death announcements. So in the obituaries, they'll quite often put, you know, Joan Smith nee Brown. So you know, oh, she was a Brown, okay. And you figure out that's the right one, because they'll list, you know, wife of, mother of, grandmother of, and you've already found, and remember, you're working backwards, so you already have who her children are. So you can find them that way as well. Some obituary records will have the woman's maiden name on there, so that people will know who she is, especially those that know the family. So there's another great resource too. And sometimes in birth announcements in newspapers, they would have Joan Smith, and in parentheses it would have Brown, which meant that was her maiden name. So sometimes if you see names in parentheses, that's usually the maiden name of the woman that's there. So that's another way that you can find them too. So there's all sorts of resources that you can use to find maiden names, even asking family members. Simple one, ask family members. But anyway, thank you, Sam, for your question on how you find a female ancestor's maiden name. So you've got birth certificates, christening records, birth announcements, marriage announcements in newspapers, obituaries, christening records, and then of course marriage certificates. That's another one. Marriage certificates of the kids. You may have the mother's maiden name on there too. So when you find when the kids get married, on some of the records that they used to have back in the 1800s, they would list, on the marriage certificates, they would list the mother's maiden name on there as well. So some of them, they listed only the father and his occupation, and on some, they started doing a little later, they would show, depending which area you were in as well, they would show the mother's name along with her maiden name. So say that was the parents of that particular child that's getting married. So there's another way you can find it. So I hope that helps answer your question, Sam. I love these questions. Keep these genealogy questions coming in. If you've got a stumbling block, or you're got a question about what does this term mean, or how do I find this, please send me a private message. I'm more than happy to. Next week we're going to be starting up the genealogy question of the day. And have that going. I still haven't decided if I'm going to do it as a Facebook Live or just do it straight onto YouTube as a video. Still working on that. But anyway, have a super fantastic, sparkling, magical Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you guys tomorrow morning. Hei konera!